I guess I'm going to be aiding listening to that Professor Norston, but the scenario analysis that you talked about where we kind of missed the doubling of coal going up, I've read some recent reports that suggest that we're going to see solar go the other direction, that solar cells, for example, costs could drop in half in a relatively short amount of time. Are the scenarios taking into account things like that?
Yeah, I think when you think about my comment slide that shows the relative cost of the resources, I think you would look at the trend of solar prices, and basically as solar continues to get ramped up, the costs continue to drop dramatically. So I think that would be part of your scenario planning, was you have different assumptions about what do you think the prices of solar are going to be, and based on what prices have done in the last few years, I think you have to assume the solar is going to continue to go down dramatically. It's still going to be relatively high compared to thermal resources. You obviously have the intermittency issues that needs to be firmed up with something like a natural gas-fired simple cycle combustion turbine, but solar prices have come way down. They will projected to continue going down. I think that would be captured in a rigorous integrated resource planning analysis.
Jim, I'll throw this out to you since the crowd is quiet. Ooh, Carol. She saved Carol.
Hi. This is probably going to sound like sort of a weird question, but I'm wondering, as far as efficiency and cost to the consumer and to society, if any part of these calculations look at other costs of the power sources, like healthcare effects and things like that, or is it just strictly dollars and cents and it costs so much to... Does anybody understand what I'm talking about?
I can start off that based on my experience in integrated resource planning. It was a big issue, and I think the issue is the inclusion of environmental adders. That if you're going to install a coal plant or a natural gas power plant, anything that emits CO2, you're going to have a price on carbon in there. You're going to have a price on particulate matter. You're going to have, when you're looking at the cost of these generated resources, you're going to be looking at not just the dollars and cents, engineering costs, accounting type costs. You're going to be looking at the environmental costs. You're going to be attempting to capture the relative environmental impacts of thermal-based generation versus renewable energy. Whether it goes beyond that to talk about the social cost of carbon is another thing. So that most of the environmental adders I'm familiar with don't go that far, but there is an attempt to try to look at the broader definition of costs in this process, and that makes energy efficiency look relatively preferable, given that you're going to avoid all those costs by investing in energy efficiency.
I was just going to add that in doing these IRPs, there's often a suite of economic tests that are applied to the results of these scenarios. So one is a ratepayers test, and the sole test is whether or not rates will go up or down. And then there's a total resource cost test, or a societal test, which takes into account a broader set of benefits, where they would take the number of children with asthma and monetize it somehow and throw that into the cost. So for each 100 cases of asthma, you were going to credit that scenario at so many dollars, and people will often arm wrestle over that, how much these things are worth. But these tests are used to guide decision makers, usually at the regulatory commission level, tests. So you need to apply these tests sometimes together and get different indications from the test result. But what you're talking about can be done, and there's great controversy over how deep you get into that. And in fact, a typical example is if you're in an electric IRP and there's a prevalence of gas furnaces in your local homes. Now you're going to save electricity because your indoor fan or other things are going to run less. You're going to have less operating time because the house is more efficient. And you're going to be saving natural gas. Now, the ratepayer test won't pick that up because it's not the fuel source for electric utility, but the societal cost will pick it up because that's an overall societal cost that gets reduced. So there's a lot of controversy, and that's why these stakeholder groups are very important to get all these different viewpoints thrown into the hopper, where the people conducting the stakeholder groups and the regulators themselves at a later date can make sense out of all this and come up with a reasonable policy.
And make sure that you're holding the mic up close enough. That's good. I hope you got it. Your mic. Did you hold it? Jen, did you have anything to say?
That is one of the things that we generally calculate would be the societal test that goes along with it. It's a little bit more difficult to calculate, but one thing to keep in mind is the commissions generally don't look that closely at the societal test because they are looking more at the cost benefit analysis to the ratepayer.
Just one final thing. I wanted to give credit to ACEEE, American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, for providing the slides that I used. As far as I know, the numbers for those different sources of energy are based on the numbers, the accounting for numbers that are done by the companies in determining costs. None of those other societal things are included in those costs.
Hi, this is a question for Kathy or Professor Van Nostrand. In regard to these cost planning, what are some of the other surrounding states doing? Do you know?
I'm not very familiar with it. I mean, a lot of our surrounding states are deregulated with respect to electric utilities, which is means they often have a different long-term planning process because the utilities that are directly selling power to customers aren't involved in the generation process. So in terms of our immediately surrounding states, I'm not sure what their policies are, but maybe Jamie can speak more broadly to other states.
I guess my experience on it is that I'm more familiar with sort of what's going on broadly nationally. One of the things that we're going to put a conference on this fall at the law school. Last fall, our first conference was on Marcellus Shale and shale gas development. Our conference this fall is going to be more or less an energy policy summit where we will look at sort of West Virginia versus the surrounding states with respect to energy efficiency, integrated resource planning, and alternative renewable energy. So I think we'll know more after that. But I think if you look at some of the utilities that operate within West Virginia and also operate in the surrounding states, I think you will find they do a more rigorous integrated resource planning process to satisfy the requirements of the surrounding states than they do in West Virginia because we simply have not forced that rigorous analysis. And I don't think that's been in the best long-term interests of our ratepayers in this state. This is really prudent utility practice for helping keep utility rates down. And coming back in terms of energy efficiency, sort of the economic disincentive for utilities to invest in energy efficiency. I mean, I think we need to recognize that. I mean, I represented Western Utilities for 22 years. I pretty much know how they think. And it is not in their economic interest to promote energy efficiency. They're going to lose money. But there are rate-making mechanisms to deal with that, and that needs to be on the table too, because I don't think we can expect the utilities to engage in an activity that's against their economic interest, but we can deal with that through rate making, so we get the utilities working with the customers in the customer's best long-term interest. I think that's part of the sort of the overall regulatory package that we need to be looking at.
If I could help with that question also, Appalachian Power does provide an integrated resource plan to the state of Virginia, and it's filed every other year, and we also provide it encompasses Appalachian Power's territory, so we also provide that integrated resource plan to the West Virginia Commission and parties that are involved there. So.
Does that mean you're already doing it? In West Virginia? For West Virginia?
We do it as encompassing all of Appalachian Power, and it is it does cover energy efficiency and demand response. Similar to the graphs that you were showing up there, we do include energy efficiency and demand response as part of those programs. One of the things, to your comment there, it does have to be a neutral perspective from the utility standpoint. As we go into doing energy efficiency, then we are looking at that, much like you're talking about in the integrated resource plan. What is the comparison for us between building a new plant and doing energy efficiency or demand response? And so we want to look at what are the economics to our company to basically be indifferent to that. Then we need to be able to get cost recovery of the programs. We need to be able to see some sort of incentive for our efforts there, similar to what we would get as far as a cost of capital and a plant operation. And then also additionally the interim lost revenues. The revenues would become neutral once we went in for a rate case and trued things up. But it's the interim lost revenues that we would be looking for there.
This is somewhat related to utilities, but not quite on the subject. Energy rebates by utilities for more efficient equipment could be used to help hold down the demand so that the maximum demand a utility might see is what they can produce, thus avoiding building new power plants. That could be a real reason for rebates. If West Virginia adopts 2009, the efficiencies of equipment jump up dramatically. And the current rebate programs you might have are actually below the efficiency levels now in place. Would you consider then bumping them up to a beyond code status, perhaps to the 2012 efficiency standards?
Let me just add while I'm handing the microphone over. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits of integrated resource planning is you decide the level of those rebates based on that integrated analysis. You're going to decide how much you're going to pay to acquire energy efficiency and conservation based on what costs you're going to avoid by not having to build generation. So it's that integration on the demand side and supply side that informs how much you're going to set those rebates. So when utilities come in with their energy efficiency programs, they've designed tariffs, and those tariffs reflect that cost data. They know how much they're going to pay because they know how many kilowatt hours that's going to save. And that cost is informed by the integrated resource planning process if it's done correctly. So I would hope that those rebates would reflect the costs that are going to be avoided by not having to build generation.
I think you covered it well there, and it is a matter of looking at the cost benefit, the test that he was talking about there as far as the REM test or the TRC. You have to look at what our avoided costs are, what is the next unit of generation going to cost us, and then compare that to what the cost benefit would be of rebating that particular item, and to what degree talked about here was what the cost of energy efficiency is. Well, that's on a curve as far as what the cost of energy, each kilowatt hour of energy efficiency is. This room is probably not a representative group, but if you took a representative group of the state, say there's 10 people, then one is going to be very environmentally minded and is going to do everything that they can without any effort by us to be very energy efficient. Do it at this level of rebate and even more at this level of rebate. So the cost per kilowatt hour of energy efficiency goes up the more you try and penetrate into the market. So essentially we're still trying to get the low-hanging fruit.
Any other questions? This isn't the end of this conversation, correct? Do we have another question? Can one of you speak to the plans for moving forward in West Virginia? Are you continuing to talk? Is this the first time you've talked with Jim and the whole gang?
I'll start since I have the microphone. We have started, met Delegate Penny Penny at the Habitat for Humanity Efficiency Conference in Morgantown. We began conversations then that we need to look at this from everyone's perspective, and we started conversations since then and have met a couple times. In those conversations, I've suggested that we need to look at this as somewhat from everybody's perspective. The commission is very important. It's sometimes hard to get what their views are. They generally look to the legislators for direction, but then they do have opinions of their own. Virginia is a good example of that. They have a very attractive code in place to do energy efficiency there. The measures that I talked about are there to give recovery of costs, to get margin, and to get lost revenues. But however, the commission has not totally embraced it. And one of the things that was talked about here, they look on the cost-benefit analysis. Their primary measure is the RIM test, which is difficult for energy efficiency measures, almost impossible for energy efficiency measures to pass that test. So it becomes difficult to get programs past there. There are programs that have passed there, and we plan to file there also. So, but I think it is a matter of looking at everyone's perspective, so that you're getting everyone's input into this. The other perspective from the commission, we did have Byron Harris that came and met with us one day. We have had several rate cost increases over the past few years with the cost of coal and the environmental spend, and the commission is very sensitive to any kind of rate increases. Energy efficiency, while it has paybacks, initially it is rate increases. We are also very sensitive to that too, because we're the ones that are trying to keep our customers satisfied. I mean, it's difficult in an environment like this. The EPA is the one that mandates that we do the environmental spend, but to the public, we're the ones that are asking for the rate increase to cover that. So we do want to make sure that our customers are happy and satisfied, and so we have to be conscious of any kind of rate increases there.
I just might add, if you're going to have your policy conference, you might do some research on how many states rely on these different tests. I know Florida passed some legislation once upon a time ruling out the TRC. I've been involved in some Georgia IRPs where it used to be RIM test only, and then they keep it for informational purposes, but the programmatic choices are made on the TRC tests. And it is dramatic. We made a presentation once to the Florida Public Service Commission showing a suite of programs, how they fared under the RIM test. And I'd say 9 out test is very, very important. In fact, I even remember a municipality down in Florida where the utility manager claimed that all this efficiency stuff was not cost effective. He failed to notify the town council that there were other tests. And that caused a lot of ramifications because the policy of the town council was to go for energy efficiency. But they were in the dark. They didn't know that there were other tests out there they could look at to be informed about the various impacts. The utility is impacted, the public is impacted, different market segments within the utility service district are impacted, like residential, commercial, industrial. So there's a lot of things to consider, and that's why this stakeholder process is really all important. First, it gets it out of the adversarial setting, where I've been through a few of those too, and you just don't want to go through that. It's more collegial and being able to have polite discussions with people rather than tooth and nail adversarial fights in the hearing room. So that will go a long way toward sorting out the different policy options, but it helps to have goals. And I don't think that you can look at IRP and these energy efficiency portfolio standards independently. They're connected. And once you set state policy goals that we want to try to bend the curve on load growth, once you get to that point where you can set goals to do that, then the IRP process will guide you toward what's the least revenue requirement that you need from your customers to meet that load in the future. And this is vastly oversimplified because it's a terribly complex subject matter, and a power company, there may be 50, 60 people that work on this all the time. Crunching numbers, looking at different scenarios, different technologies that will all come together on this. So it's a very complex undertaking, but there's probably half the states that do this. They find themselves in a position where that's their best option, is to go with these standards and some type of IRP.